You forget one thing, Julian. I play the long game.
You forget one thing, Julian. I play the long game. They say marriage starts like a poker game. You begin with a full house, a queen, a king, and the future in your hands. But by the end, you're just hoping you don't get dealt a bad hand by the jack. Well, I was looking at the jack right now, and I was about to call his bluff. He was my wife's brother-in-law, a man who saw my home as his personal casino and my wife as his winning ticket. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm thrilled to have you here for what's going to be a much deeper, more intricate story than anything we've covered before. If you enjoy stories about complex family dynamics, hidden motives, and calculated revenge, you've found the right place. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because you will not want to miss a single second of this journey. Now, grab a drink, get comfortable, because we have a lot to unpack. My name is Leo Martinez, and I'm a foreman at a Detroit auto plant. I'm 45 years old, built like a guy who played football in high school and never quite gave up on pasta. My hands are calloused from years of work, a testament to a life spent building things, fixing things. It's an honest life, a good one. I've been married to Sophia for 20 years, or at least, that's what the calendar says. We have an incredible daughter, Maya, who's 18 and the spitting image of her mother, but with my stubborn chin. She's my whole world, and in 1 month, she's heading off to college, the first in our family. On the surface, our life is the American dream, etched into the suburban landscape of Michigan. A paid-off mortgage, a reliable truck, a family. But you'd be wrong to think that. Dead wrong. Our quiet life was a placid lake, and a stone had just been tossed into it, not by chance, but with deliberate, malicious aim. The ripples were about to become a tidal wave. It all began 4 months ago when Sophia's younger sister, Clara, married a piece of work named Julian Vance. He was a regional manager for some soulless tech corporation, drove a silent, silver Audi that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie, and wore suits that cost more than my monthly paycheck. The guy had the personality of a pop-up ad you can't close, intrusive, slick, and fundamentally fake. From the moment we shook hands at the wedding, he looked at me not as a new brother, but as an obstacle. He'd scan our home with a practiced eye, not admiring it, but appraising it, calculating its worth. His smile never quite reached his eyes. Leo works with his hands, he'd say at family dinners, his voice dripping with condescension disguised as admiration. He'd make it sound like I was a caveman who had just discovered fire. Manual labor. Such honest, simple work. The way he stressed simple made honest feel like a 4-letter word. It was a subtle poison, and he administered it in small, careful doses. But here's where the story takes its dark turn. Julian didn't just marry into our family. He launched a corporate-style hostile takeover of it. He saw weaknesses and opportunities where I only saw the life we'd built. His target wasn't just our finances. It was the very foundation of my marriage and my identity. It started with small, insidious suggestions. He'd take Sophia aside at family gatherings, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. He suggested she deserved bigger opportunities, a life beyond being married to a simple, blue-collar guy. He planted the idea that she had settled, that her potential had been wasted. He'd offer, with a grand, magnanimous gesture, to pay for Maya's college tuition. I know it must be a struggle for you too, he'd say, looking at me with faux sympathy. Leo probably hasn't been able to save enough. Each comment was a tiny, poisoned dart, aimed not at me, but at Sophia's insecurities, which I was beginning to realize ran deeper than I ever knew. And Sophia, my wife of 2 decades, drank the poison like it was the finest champagne. Suddenly, my steady, union-protected job wasn't prestigious enough. Our lifelong friends, the ones who helped us move in, who babysat Maya, weren't sophisticated enough. My dreams, which were wrapped up in providing for my family and seeing my daughter succeed, weren't grand enough for her. She'd come home from extravagant dinners at Julian and Clara's downtown condo with a new, critical gleam in her eye and a fresh list of my shortcomings. The life we had built together, once a source of pride, was now a symbol of mediocrity in her eyes. It was a slow, painful erosion of everything we were. Julian says we should refinance the house, she announced one Tuesday evening, her eyes glued to the new tablet he had gifted her. He knows a financial advisor who can get us a much better rate, unlock our equity. Our equity. The years of hard work and careful payments, reduced to a financial tool for a man we barely knew. Julian thinks you should trade in your truck for something more economical, she'd say, wrinkling her nose at the vehicle that had hauled everything from lumber for our deck to Maya's soccer team. An electric vehicle would be much better for our image. Our image. Julian thinks Maya should only be applying to Ivy League schools. Community college is beneath her. The constant barrage of Julian says, Julian thinks, Julian knows best became the soundtrack to my life. I started calling him Saint Julian in my head, the patron saint of unsolicited advice and condescension, but the joke was wearing thin, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. The breaking point, the moment the cracks in our foundation became a chasm, came last month. I came home early from the plant, a rare treat, hoping to surprise Sophia. I walked into my own kitchen to find her and Julian huddled over our dining table. It wasn't a friendly chat. It was a war room, and my life was the battlefield. Spread across the polished wood was every financial document we owned. Bank statements, mortgage papers, investment portfolios, Maya's college fund, my pension details. My entire financial history, our future, lay bare for this stranger's inspection. What in the world is going on here? I asked, my voice tight, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The scene felt like a profound violation, an invasion of the most private space of our marriage. Julian looked up, and that smug, patronizing smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a predator who knew he had his prey cornered. Just helping Sophia understand her options, Leo. You've made some interesting financial choices over the years. Interesting. There it was again. The verbal pat on the head. The dismissal. Sophia wouldn't meet my eyes. She just shuffled some papers, her silence a confession of her betrayal. Julian was just explaining how we could leverage our equity to invest, she stammered. To what? I cut her off, my voice rising despite my best efforts to control it. Since when do we need his permission to manage our own damn money? Since when do our finances become a topic for a family meeting I wasn't invited to? It's not about permission, Leo, Julian said, standing up and straightening his already perfect tie. He was trying to physically dominate the space, to establish his authority in my home. It's about optimization. Sophia deserves financial security. And frankly, your approach has been rather conservative. Conservative. You said it like it was a terminal illness, a character flaw of the highest order. The same conservative approach that had our house nearly paid off, our daughter's education secured, and our retirement on track. That was it. The dam of my patience broke. Get out, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet, each word clipped and sharp. Excuse me. He actually chuckled, a sound of disbelief and amusement that grated on my raw nerves. You heard me. Get your hands off my private papers. Get out of my kitchen, and get the hell out of my house. Now. Julian laughed. A full, barking laugh of arrogance. Sophia, you see? This is the kind of explosive temper I was talking about. This is precisely the kind of irrational behavior that's been holding you back. I took one deliberate step forward. I'm 6'1" and built like a refrigerator. I've spent my life moving heavy things. Julian was maybe 5'9" in his ridiculously shiny shoes, with the soft, manicured hands of a man who's never fixed a damn thing in his life. The laugh died in his throat, replaced by a flicker of fear in his eyes. He finally understood he had pushed too far. Leo, Sophia snapped, finally finding her voice, not in my defense, but in his. He's family. He's Clara's husband. No, I said, my eyes still locked on Julian's, a cold fury burning in my chest. He's your sister's husband, and he just wore out his welcome. Permanently. Julian, ever the strategist, knew when to retreat. He slowly gathered his things. Not our papers, I noticed with a flash of clarity, but a briefcase full of printouts and forms he'd brought with him. Sophia, we'll continue this conversation later. When you're ready to have an adult discussion about your future. He made sure to emphasize the word your. Not our future. Your future. A future separate from me. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the real storm erupted. Sophia and I had the mother of all fights. The things we said to each other that night were like weapons, designed to inflict maximum damage. She called me jealous, insecure, a Neanderthal who was afraid of a successful man. She accused me of trying to sabotage her chance at a better life. I accused her of letting a venomous snake into our home, of betraying 20 years of trust, of disrespecting me in the most fundamental way. I told her she had been brainwashed by a cheap suit and a fancy car. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and irrevocable. That night, she moved into the guest room. It was a cold, silent declaration that our marriage was on life support. But that wasn't the worst part. Julian was smarter than that. A simple marital spat wasn't enough. He needed to isolate me completely. The worst part was what he did to my friends. Frank Russo has been my best friend since kindergarten. We learned to ride bikes together, went to prom in the same rented limo, and were each other's best men. He was the brother I'd chosen. Or so I thought. You need to apologize to Julian. He told me the following Friday at the corner tap, our lifelong sanctuary. We were in our usual booth, the vinyl worn from decades of our conversations, but nothing felt usual. I nearly spit out my beer. You want to run that by me again? Apologize? For what? For kicking a man out of my house for trying to take it over? Frank wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared into his beer glass. Look, Leo, you can be a lot. You're stubborn. You have a temper. Maybe you overreacted. You can't just throw family out of your house because you don't like their advice. Since when are you his defense attorney? Since when do you care so much about Julian Vance? I demanded, my frustration mounting. Frank shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a tell I knew as well as my own reflection. Since he offered me a job. And there it was. The gut punch. St. Julian, the benevolent provider, had gotten to my best friend, my brother, with the one thing he knew Frank couldn't refuse: money. Frank had 2 kids, a mountain of debt from his ex-wife, and a dead-end job. He's looking for a new facilities manager at his company's new campus in Ann Arbor, Frank explained, a desperate hopefulness in his voice. Great pay, incredible benefits, a real career, Leo. He mentioned it after he heard what happened. Said he understood you were under a lot of stress, that your behavior wasn't normal. He offered you a job after I kicked him out of my house for going through my private financial papers. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a strategic masterstroke. He's trying to help, man. He sees a guy in our circle who needs a break. Maybe if you just swallowed your goddamn pride for once and admitted you were wrong. My pride. I stood up so fast the table rattled, spilling beer onto the floor. This isn't about pride, Frank. This is about a rich, parasitic snake slithering into my life, turning my wife against me, and now buying off my best friend with a job offer to make me look like the crazy one. Or maybe, Frank shot back, his own anger flaring. It's about you being too damn stubborn and paranoid to see when someone is trying to help your family. You're not the only one who cares about Sophia and Maya. I stared at the man I once trusted with my life and saw a stranger. Julian hadn't just bought Frank's loyalty. He had skillfully reframed the entire situation, selling Frank a narrative where I was the unstable, aggressive villain, and Julian was the concerned, generous hero. Enjoy your new job, I said, my voice cold and flat. I threw a 20 on the table and walked out, leaving 25 years of friendship drowning in a puddle of spilled beer. The poison spread with terrifying efficiency. Julian wasn't just working on my inner circle. He was carpet bombing my entire social life. The next week, Dave Chun, a guy I'd coached Little League with for a decade, practically ran from me in the hardware store. When I finally cornered him in the plumbing aisle, he stammered out some nonsense about how Sophia had been calling their wives. She was worried about me. She'd told them I was exhibiting erratic behavior, that I was becoming paranoid and delusional. Paranoid. Right. I was paranoid for not wanting my brother-in-law to liquidate my assets. Then there was Sam Jones, my next-door neighbor for 15 years. We were the kind of neighbors who didn't need to knock. Sam's wife got the same call from Sophia. A tearful, heart-wrenching performance about how I had threatened Julian, and she was becoming scared of my increasingly volatile temper. One by one, the people I had counted on, the fabric of my life, chose sides. And it wasn't my side. The genius of Julian's campaign was how plausible it all sounded from the outside. A successful, concerned brother-in-law tries to help a struggling family. The insecure, blue-collar husband lashes out in a jealous rage. The terrified wife reaches out to her support network. The friends, naturally, rally around the perceived victim. I was being systematically and brilliantly painted as the abusive, unstable bad guy in the story of my own life. And the brushstrokes were so damn subtle, so masterful, I almost started to believe it myself. I'd lie awake at night in my lonely bed, the guest room door a silent accusation down the hall, and I'd wonder, am I going crazy? Almost. But then I would remember the cold, calculating look in Julian's eyes in my kitchen. I knew what I saw. This wasn't help. This was a demolition. The final, soul-crushing blow came 2 weeks later at Maya's high school graduation party. We threw it in the backyard, a ghost of the happy family we once were. I was at the grill, flipping burgers, trying to plaster a proud father's smile on my face, when I overheard Sophia's voice. She was holding court with a group that included Frank, Dave, and their wives. Leo has always been a little intense, she was saying in a hushed, confessional tone that carried across the lawn. He has that old-school machismo. But lately, it's different. He's just so angry all the time. So suspicious of everyone. I'm honestly starting to worry about Maya being around him when he's like this. Maya, my daughter, my reason for breathing. The idea that she would need protection from me. It was a knife in my heart, twisted with surgical precision. Maybe he needs to talk to a professional, suggested Dave's wife, her face a mask of pity. Julian thinks it might be a severe midlife crisis, Sophia continued, her voice filled with a perfect imitation of concern. You know, that moment when men realize their limitations. Limitations, like being a foreman who provided an honest, comfortable life for his family with some kind of disability, a failure to be looked down upon. That was the last straw. I turned off the propane, set the tongs down, and walked over to the group. The conversation died instantly. A guilty silence fell over them. Having a good time? I asked, my voice dangerously pleasant. They all nodded nervously, avoiding my eyes. Great. Frank, Dave, thanks for coming. It was good of you to stop by. Drive safe on your way home. Frank looked utterly confused. Leo, the party's not over. We just got here. No, I said, forcing a brittle smile. It just ended. For you. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the hum of the cicadas, the distant laughter of kids. You're making a huge mistake, Leo, Frank said finally, standing up, his face a mixture of anger and pity. You're right, I replied, my voice finally cracking with the weight of it all. My mistake was thinking any of you were my friends. They left. All of them. Without another word. Sophia was seething with a cold, righteous fury. Maya, who had seen the whole exchange, was mortified, her face flushed with embarrassment. And I was standing alone in the middle of my own backyard, next to a grill full of food nobody wanted, surrounded by the ruins of my life. That night, after Maya had escaped to a friend's house and Sophia had locked herself in the guest room, I sat in my silent kitchen and took a long, hard inventory. My wife had chosen a con man she'd known for 4 months over her husband of 20 years. My daughter was trapped in a war she didn't start. My friends, my entire support system, had been systematically turned against me. My own neighbors probably thought I was a ticking time bomb. Most men, in that situation, would have thrown in the towel. They would have crumbled, apologized, swallowed their pride, and begged to be let back into the life that had been stolen from them. They would have accepted the narrative written for them by a master manipulator. But I'm not most men. I'm a builder. And as I sat there, in the rubble, a cold, clear, and quiet resolve settled over me. Julian wanted to demolish my life. Fine. But he forgot one thing. I know how to read a blueprint. And I was about to draw one of my own. I was going to build him a cage, piece by piece. This is the turning point, where the victim decides to fight back, not with anger, but with intelligence. It's one thing to be betrayed, but it's another thing entirely to decide to dismantle your enemy's life with cold, calculated precision. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in Leo's situation. And if you're as invested in this as I am, hitting that like button really helps the story reach more people. Okay, let's see how Leo plays the long game. There's a unique kind of purity in hitting rock bottom. When you have nothing left to lose, you gain a terrifying sort of freedom. The planning phase of my revenge became my sanctuary. The late nights weren't filled with despair anymore. They were filled with purpose. The quiet hum of my old desktop computer was the only sound in the house, a war drum beating softly in the dark. My first objective was simple: know thine enemy. I started with research. Julian Vance, regional manager at Omnitech Solutions. High-rise condo, leased Audi, member of the Orchard Hills Golf and Country Club. On paper, he was the picture of corporate success. But paper can be folded, ripped, and ultimately burned. It took me 2 solid weeks of late nights fueled by black coffee and cold fury. I dove into the murky depths of the internet, a world I usually only used for fantasy football and DIY forums. Public records, county clerk websites, professional networking sites that were a maze of self-promotion, forgotten social media profiles. People leave digital breadcrumbs everywhere, a trail of their true selves, and Julian's trail was long and dirty. The first major red flag was his employment history. The resume he proudly displayed online showed a steady climb up the corporate ladder. But digging into news archives and state business filings told a different story. For different tech companies in 6 years. That wasn't climbing, that was fleeing. Each departure coincided with a corporate restructuring or the quiet departure of a senior financial officer. It was a pattern of getting in, getting close to the money, and getting out before the auditors arrived. The second red flag was his own finances. It was the most difficult to uncover, but I got creative. I used public property records to see the mortgage details on his condo. He was leveraged to the hilt, with 2 mortgages at a dangerously high loan-to-value ratio. A little more digging on automotive forums helped me figure out his Audi was a lease, likely a high-payment one. The golf club membership, I discovered through a brochure, was a corporate perk tied to his current job, not a personal luxury. The man wasn't wealthy. He was a house of cards in a hurricane, living paycheck to paycheck, just on a much grander, more fraudulent scale. The third and most damning red flag was the human cost of his past. This took the most work. I cross-referenced names from his old social media friend lists with public court records in Ohio and Indiana, where his previous jobs had been. And there it was. A pattern of predation. 3 times in the last 5 years, he had inserted himself into a family. Always through a new relationship, offered his financial expertise, and left a trail of destruction. I found the Hendersons in Toledo. A civil suit, dismissed for lack of evidence, accused him of convincing them to refinance their family home to invest in a can't-miss tech startup that vanished into thin air. They lost the house. I found the Martins in Indianapolis. An elderly couple, the parents of a woman he dated for 8 months. They accused him of churning their retirement portfolio into oblivion with high-risk trades, earning himself massive commissions. They lost everything. Julian was too slick for outright theft. That would be traceable. He was a parasite, a master of persuasion who convinced his hosts to bleed for him, making it all look perfectly legal, just unfortunate. And now, my family was his next meal. Sophia's complete and utter faith in him was the key to his whole plan. She wasn't just defending a man she thought was kind. She was an active, willing accomplice in her own financial ruin. Those papers I saw on the kitchen table weren't just statements. They were loan applications, beneficiary change forms for our life insurance, power of attorney documents, all prepped for her signature. My wife was about to hand him the keys to our entire future, and she genuinely believed she was the sophisticated one, while I was the paranoid fool. But here's the thing Sophia and Julian didn't know about me. I may work with my hands, but my mind is always turning, always analyzing, always seeing how the pieces fit together. It's what makes me a good foreman. I see the whole assembly line, not just the individual part. And I was looking at the whole, ugly machine of Julian's design. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. I wasn't going to confront him. That would just feed the narrative he'd so carefully constructed. The unstable, jealous husband. No, I was going to let him build his own gallows. All I had to do was provide the rope. Step 1. Meticulous documentation. I became a librarian of betrayal. I saved every text message. I used a small, legal app on my phone to record every single conversation I had with him and Sophia. I installed high-quality, motion-activated security cameras in the common areas of my own home, not to spy, but to create an unassailable record of his presence and our interactions, protecting myself from the inevitable accusations of threatening behavior. Step 2. The bait. This was the hardest part. I had to swallow every ounce of my pride. I went to Sophia, my hat in my hand, and delivered the performance of a lifetime. I apologized. I told her she was right. I was insecure about our finances, I was stressed about my job, and I had let my pride get in the way of a great opportunity. I told her that maybe we should listen to Julian's advice. The relief that washed over her face was so profound it was almost painful to watch. She didn't question it for a second. It confirmed everything she wanted to believe. Neither did Julian. When Sophia eagerly invited him back over for a peacemaking dinner, he saw my surrender as his ultimate victory, the final validation of his superiority. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason, Leo," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with a disgusting familiarity. "There's no shame in accepting help from family. It's what we do." I just nodded and played my part. "You're right. I guess I was just in over my head." Step 3. The trap. For the next month, I became Julian's shadow. With Sophia's enthusiastic encouragement, I fed him a steady diet of carefully curated financial information. It was a masterpiece of misinformation. Just enough truth to be believable, but laced with enough subtle falsehoods to make any action he took based on it fraudulent. I gave him statements for a savings account, but I changed a few numbers. I told him our income, but inflated it by 15%. I let him see our life insurance policies, but not the legal, notarized addendums I'd had drawn up and filed, which voided any beneficiary changes made without my signature in the presence of a bank officer. I played the part of the financially illiterate fool he believed me to be. Julian took the bait hook, line, and sinker. He started handling the paperwork, volunteering to meet with advisors, who were likely just his co-conspirators, all to help poor, overwhelmed Leo navigate the complex world of finance. And Sophia, my wife, championed his every move. She signed every paper he put in front of her, her face glowing with pride for her sophisticated, caring brother-in-law. With every stroke of her pen, she was unknowingly building the federal case that would destroy him. The intervention from my so-called friends was the next crucial piece of the puzzle. I knew it was coming. I was counting on it. They showed up on a Saturday afternoon, Frank, Dave, and Sam, a delegation of deep concern, summoned by Sophia to save me from myself. "We need to talk, Leo," Frank said grimly when I answered the door, his face etched with worry. "Sure," I said with a calm smile that seemed to unnerve them. "Come on in. I'll grab us some beers." They sat uncomfortably on my living room couch, a jury ready to deliver a verdict. They took turns, reading from a script likely prepared by Sophia and Julian. "We're your friends, man," Frank began, his voice soft and cautious. "We're worried about you. We think you might be having some kind of breakdown." "A breakdown?" I asked, taking a slow sip of my beer. "Interesting diagnosis. Any of you get a medical license I don't know about?" Dave jumped in, leaning forward earnestly. "Sophia told us you guys were struggling financially, that you were under a lot of pressure. That's why Julian was just trying to help." "Struggling?" I cut him off. "That's funny. Did she happen to mention that our mortgage is almost paid off? That we have over $50,000 in a secure savings account, and that Maya's college education is fully funded and waiting for her? Did she mention we have no car payments and zero credit card debt?" The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. They exchanged confused glances. "Or did she just tell you what Julian told her to tell you?" I pressed on. That poor, simple Leo was in way over his head and needed a white knight in a fancy suit to come and save him from himself. I walked over to my old wooden filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "Here's what you guys don't get about St. Julian. He's not a savior. He's broke. And he's a predator." I laid it all out for them on the coffee table. His credit report, showing maxed out cards and late payments. His convoluted employment history. And the court records, the news clippings from the families he'd already ruined in Toledo and Indianapolis. Frank's face turned pale as he read. You investigated your own brother-in-law?" He whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "I investigated the man who was trying to systematically dismantle my life and steal my family's future." I corrected him calmly. "Let me ask you guys something. Frank, did you ever actually get that job? Has he sent you an offer letter? Or just promises?" Frank's silence was the only answer I needed. "Dave, did your wife get a call from a panicked Sophia, worried about my paranoia?" He nodded slowly, shamefaced. "Sam, did Julian happen to mention offhand that he could get the whole neighborhood better refinancing rates through his connections?" Sam's eyes went wide with recognition. "It's his playbook. It's what he does. He finds a mark, gains their trust, isolates them from their support system, and then bleeds them dry, all under the guise of helping. But he made a mistake with me. He needed Sophia to give him our money voluntarily. He couldn't just take it. That's insane, Frank stammered. Sophia would never knowingly. She already has, I said, my voice flat. She signed loan applications against our house. She's tried to change insurance beneficiaries. She's given him power of attorney over our investments. She did it all thinking she was helping me, helping us. As if on cue, the front door opened, and Sophia walked in with Julian, both of them smiling, returning from a celebratory lunch. They'd been listening from the porch. I knew they would be. It was part of the trap. Leo, what is this? Sophia demanded, her eyes flashing with anger as she took in the scene, the papers on the table, the guilty faces of my friends. This is an honest conversation, I said, my voice steady. Something we haven't had in months. Julian stepped forward, puffing out his chest, his face a mask of practiced outrage. You have no right making these wild, slanderous accusations. I have every right to protect my family from a professional con artist. I shot back, my voice finally rising. Con artist? He sputtered, his voice going up an octave. I have done nothing but try to help you people. You people, I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. There it is. The truth, finally. The real Julian Vance. I walked to my desk, my movements slow and deliberate, and pulled out another folder. Here's the loan application you had Sophia sign last week, Julian. The one for $100,000, using our house as collateral for one of your business investments. Sophia looked like she was going to faint. He said. He told me it was just routine paperwork for the refinancing. Routine for him, maybe, I said, handing the thick file to Frank. It's all in there. Police reports, bankruptcy filings from his other victims. The Hendersons in Ohio. The Martins in Indiana. Our boy Julian has been very, very busy. Julian's face had gone from red to a pasty white. He was backing toward the door. This is libel. It's ridiculous. I don't have to listen to these paranoid fantasies. No, you don't, I agreed with a cold smile. But you might want to stick around for the grand finale. I went to my desk one last time and pulled out the final, thickest folder. See, here's the really beautiful part, Julian. While you were so busy getting my wife to sign fraudulent documents based on the fake financials I gave you, I was busy protecting our actual assets. Every single form you had her sign, I had it legally nullified by a superior, notarized document she'd signed the day before, thinking they were just updated tax and insurance forms from my work. Every account you thought you gained access to, I had it frozen and the funds transferred to a new account in my name alone 2 weeks ago. Every power of attorney she signed, it's a worthless piece of paper. Julian's face was ashen. His composure was completely gone. That's impossible. I watched her sign them. Oh, it gets better, I said, picking up my phone. Because when you knowingly use falsified financial data, which is what I fed you for a month, to apply for major bank loans, that's not just a civil matter. That's wire fraud. Bank fraud. It's a federal offense. The income statements I gave you, the asset lists, all of it was a lie. Designed to be just believable enough for you to use, but provably false enough for the FBI to prosecute. I have recordings of every conversation, Julian. I have copies of every document you touched. And I have a very, very interested federal agent on speed dial. Her name is Agent Miller. He lunged at me, a wild, desperate animal. But I was ready. I've worked in a factory my whole life. I know how to handle myself. I sidestepped his clumsy charge, and he crashed into the heavy oak bookshelf, sending books and treasured family photos flying. He went down in a heap of his own making. Self-defense, I said calmly to the shocked room. All captured on high-definition video by those security cameras I installed last month. What happened next was a beautiful, satisfying chaos. Frank, God bless him, finally realizing the depth of the deception, moved to block the door. Dave was already on the phone with 911. Julian was screaming threats and curses, and Sophia was sitting on the floor, sobbing, finally understanding that the man she had championed wasn't her savior, but her destroyer. The police arrived in minutes. It was almost anticlimactic. I handed the lead detective my meticulously organized folders of evidence. It's all in there, I said. A 3-month timeline. The lead detective, a sharp woman named Martinez, flipped through the files, her eyebrows rising. Mr. Martinez, she said, looking from the files to a now handcuffed Julian. We've been building a peripheral case against Mr. Vance for months, based on a complaint out of Ohio. We just could never get enough evidence to make it stick. This file, this isn't just a piece of the puzzle. This is the whole damn picture. As they led a defeated, trembling Julian away in handcuffs, he stopped and turned back to look at me, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred. This isn't over, Leo. Yeah, it is, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Enjoy federal prison. After they left, the house was silent, except for Sophia's ragged sobs. My friends, my real friends, looked at me with a newfound respect, but also with shame for their own blindness. The aftermath was as messy and complicated as you'd expect. Julian, facing an ironclad federal case, took a plea deal, 7 years in a federal, minimum security prison. Sophia filed for divorce. I didn't fight it. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some trust can never be rebuilt. We agreed to be civil for Maya's sake. The house became quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. The tension that had choked the air for months was finally gone. Maya and I found our new rhythm, a new kind of family, built on honesty and mutual respect. A few months later, she was packing her things for college, the dorm room boxes piled high in the living room. You know, she said, taping up a box filled with books. Mom always said you didn't think big enough, that you weren't ambitious. But you took down a corporate shark with an MBA using nothing but patience and a plan. And a healthy dose of paranoia, I added with a grin. That night, after she'd left to spend her last night of freedom with her friends, I sat on my back porch with a cold beer, watching the Michigan sunset paint the sky. My life had been turned upside down, ripped apart, and painstakingly reassembled. I had lost a wife, and I had nearly lost my friends. But in the process, I had found a strength in myself I never knew I had. I learned that I could play the long game. And I learned that sometimes, the smartest, most dangerous man in the room isn't the one in the expensive suit with the silver tongue. It's the quiet, underestimated guy who works with his hands, protects his family at all costs, and knows the true value of patience. Julian Vance made a fatal mistake. He saw a simple man and assumed he was a stupid one. He underestimated me. And that mistake cost him everything. What a wild, intricate, and ultimately satisfying ride. It just goes to show you that you should never, ever underestimate the quiet ones. Leo's story is a testament to intelligence, patience, and the fierce instinct to protect one's family. Thank you all for staying with us through this incredibly detailed story. If you have a story you think we should hear, our doors are always open. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives like this. Hit that like button to show your support, and I will see you all in the next one.